Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's expert webinar titled Database Connectivity Using Python. I am Ria from SpringPeople. We are India's largest enterprise training provider. I will be your moderator for today's session. In today's session, we have Pallavi Prasad with us, who is an accomplished corporate trainer with a passion for bridging the gap between technology and business. With over 500 successful training sessions delivered, she has earned recognition as a trusted expert in her field. Pallavi is laser-focused expertise in C with data structures, OOPS concepts, C++, VC++, multi-threading, core Java, JEE, Spring, Hibernate, Unix, Linux, shell scripting, .NET Framework 3.5, VB.NET, ASP.NET, ADO.NET, JavaScript, PhoneGap, Cordova, RPA, Automation Anywhere, UiPath, AngularJS, to name a few. Pallavi Prasad's commitment to delivering timely and effective training has consistently added value to organizations, ensuring that participants are well equipped to apply their knowledge effectively in real-world settings. In today's webinar, Pallavi Prasad will let us know about introduction to database connectivity, connecting to an RDBMS. To all the participants, you can mention your questions in the chat box and it will be answered at the end of the session. Without further ado, let's start today's session. Now, I would like to invite Mrs. Pallavi Prasad to start the session. Over to you, Pallavi.
Thank you, Ria. Good evening, everybody. So, as Ria so ably introduced me, myself is Pallavi Prasad, and let us get on with database connectivity using Python. I'm using MySQL as the RDBMS here. So, since we all know, whenever we are working with any kind of an application, we do require a persistence layer or a layer where we can store our content, whatever the content may be. Today, we are going to be looking at how to do it when we have Python and when we have an RDBMS. MySQL is one of the more easier databases to work with, which is the reason why I have chosen MySQL. But the steps are the same for any RDBMS that you would like to be working with. So the agenda for today is this. Quick introduction to how to work with the connectivity, the steps to connect to the database, and then a quick demo. Due to shortage of time, I already have the code pre-written, but I will take you through the steps on how to do it. So let's start with a quick introduction. As you very well know, databases are a very crucial part of any application that we create today. And these databases that can be used are RDBMS databases. They can be NoSQL databases as well. Again, because this is a 1-hour webinar, I have concentrated only on the RDBMS part of things. The steps from NoSQL are a little more different compared to what it is for an RDBMS. So here we are going to be working with an RDBMS like MySQL today. We use it to store, as you know, structured data or data in a very organized manner. We store them in tables, as you know, in rows and columns, each row being a record, each column being an attribute for that particular record that we're going to be working with. Today, we will also be looking at how to perform these CRUD operations using Python and MySQL. So what are the steps that we need to work with to connect to MySQL using Python? The first thing that you need to do is you need to be able to install the MySQL connector using pip. Pip is the package manager for Python. So you use pip to download and install that particular connector that we are going to be working with. As I'm using MySQL, I'm using the MySQL connector for Python. All of this is available online. These connectors are available online. So all you need to do is make sure that you have it available and download and install it. So as I said, I have already got the steps and the installations ready. So let us just quickly have a look at some of the content that I already have. So the first thing that we need to do, I have mentioned the statements as well here. So the first thing that we need to do is to check if pip is already installed. So if I'm working with version 3, since mine is Python 3, I'm using. So obviously I need to check to see if Python is, if pip is installed. Because I'm working on a Windows machine, this is the statement that we usually check to see if pip is installed or not. If it is not installed, you can please install pip by using the get-pip.py. It will install pip for you. Now, one of the things that you need to do is when you're installing the MySQL driver that is necessary or the connection driver that is required, make sure it is installed into the virtual environment of your project. It should not, please don't install it externally, because the MySQL driver is, in case of Python, very specific to the project in which you're going to be working. So we use this particular statement, py-m, pip install and my connector Python. This MySQL connector -Python, this is exclusively for Python 3. If you are working with an earlier version of Python, then just giving MySQL connector would have done the job. But here, since we are working with Python 3, this is the statement that we need to specify. You also need to use py and not Python, the entire statement, again, because we are working with Python 3. So you can check to see if Python is, if your MySQL connector has been installed successfully by going to idle and checking to see if the installation went through successfully. If it is, great. But most of the time, we prefer installing it into our virtual environment, which I have done for you. Now, once that is done, we have to create a connection with the database. So to create a connection with the database, we need to first and foremost import the MySQL connector into our project. So we give an import statement. Then we have a connect method that is a part of the connector that we use that will allow us to connect to the database. Now, if you have a pre-available database, connecting to it is going to be very easy because you're going to be mentioning the name of the database. In case you don't have a database pre-created, you can create a database just by establishing a connection to the database server and then executing your queries. So for you to be able to execute your queries, you need to be able to create what is called as a cursor object. Now this cursor object is what is used to create or to fire the queries that you're going to write. So any SQL query you write, if you want to execute it, it is done through your cursor object only. Once the cursor object is created and you have fired your queries, you need to be able to commit the queries. Your insert, update, and delete queries of the CRUD operations that we usually perform, they need to have a commit statement associated with them. Even if auto commit is on in the server, Python will not commit it into the database unless and until the commit statement is fired. The reason is because it works within a virtual sandbox where unless you as a developer are sure that it has to be in the database, Python will not do it for you. So it is very, 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 for want of a better word, obedient. And it will do exactly and however much you tell it to do. It will not go beyond what you have asked of it. So please make sure that you write a commit statement after your SQL queries, especially the insert, update, and delete. Coming to the select queries, as you know, select is just retrievals. So you don't need a commit because there is no transaction that is happening with the database. One more thing you need to make sure is that you close the connection every time you're done with that particular execution. So you can write this in multiple ways. You can write it in a single .py file, or you can write it through multiple files that you have worked with. So that's your choice on how you plan on doing it. Now, when I'm working with a database, one of the first things that I need to make sure is that I have the database created or not. In this case, I'm not going to be creating a database in the beginning itself. We will create the database through our code. Now, before I continue with all of that, let me just show you the MySQL database or the MySQL server that I'm going to be using. Now, this is the MySQL workbench that I will be making use of. These are all some databases that I already have pre-available, but I'm not going to be using any of these. We will be creating a brand new database for the purpose of this particular example only, nothing beyond that. So let us start by getting into our PyCharm. I'm using PyCharm as my IDE. This is the IDE, as I already told you, it is rewritten. So I'm not going to be writing the code for you again. I will just be explaining how it works, and I will be firing the queries and showing them as to how it works. Now, before anything else, let me just comment out everything. Right. So I'm just closing everything. I have closed everything. There is nothing at present that is available. Don't worry about the errors. They'll go away the minute I'm done with my work. So now let us get into our terminal first. So if you look at this, this is my terminal that I have, and this is the virtual environment that I am using at present. So I created a brand new application, and I actually wrote in everything, but I'm going to have to install the MySQL connector inside this virtual environment. If you open the libraries that I have, you will notice that it has actually added the MySQL connector here. Now, the statement that we use to be able to connect or to be able to install the MySQL connector is by using py-m. You guys have seen the statement that we used to install. So what would be the statement that we would be using to install this particular this one? So all you're going to do is you're going to use py-m pip install and then specify the MySQL connector -python. This is the statement that you give when you plan on installing the MySQL connector. So if your connector is not already installed, it is going to install it, but not a problem. In my case, it's already installed. So it says requirement is already satisfied, as I have already installed the MySQL connector. In case it is not, it will install it for you. Now, this is once you have installed the MySQL connector, as you can see, then we start by writing the rest of the code. Here, what I have done is I have written two types. One is I have written everything into the main.py, which is not recommended. Second is I have written a separate CRUD operations file that I'm using to push the content into main and call the methods or functions from main. So for me to be able to use this particular connector, I need to import the connector. So I've imported the MySQL connector. As you can see, there are two explicit modules that I have imported here. One of them is called connect and the other one is called as error. So the error is the one that I'm using for error handling. Connect is what I'm going to be using connecting to the MySQL database. So the statement that we use when we want to be able to connect is when we work with this particular mysql.connector.connect. Now I need to check to see why it is giving me an issue. So there. So mysql.connector.connect. You are going to have to mention which is the host that you're working with, what is the username, and what is the password. So this is what you need when you want to be able to establish a connection. Now I want to be able to create a database. So for me to be able to create a database, I need to have a cursor. So I'm creating a cursor here. So I'm creating a cursor called as my cursor, which I'm going to be using to connect to the MySQL DB. So once I've established the connection, now I'm creating the cursor. Okay, so why is it giving me this? I need to cross check. It's not necessary. So once I have created my cursor, now I need to be able to execute a query for creating the database if it is not already existing. So this executes the query in case it is not already existing. So just give me a minute. It seems that I have a bit of a issue with the setup. I don't know why it's giving me a problem here, but let me just execute it and see what will happen next. Now, once you have created the database, you need to close the cursor. So I am going to be closing the cursor. So I don't need to commit anything here for a very simple reason, because I am just going to be executing a statement and nothing else. Okay, I'm just going to be executing the statement and nothing else. So let us execute this and see why is it giving me. Oh, indentation error is the reason why it is giving me this problem. So let us just unindent it. That was the reason. It's an ID issue, looks like. Sorted. Now there seems to be one more. Let me check where. Okay, done. So problem seems to be solved. And now let's run it again. Again, it says there seems to be an indentation error somewhere. I seem to be getting a lot of unexpected errors today. So no issues, it says an indentation error. So I'm just going to do one thing. It says it accepted in a particular line. Okay, what could be the problem? I have no idea why it is giving me an indentation error again, but it seems to be. Let's run it and see. Again, there seems to be an issue with the indentation. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to remove the try block and all this everything, just removing everything till here. I'm commenting out everything. Okay. And deleted it. So there should be no indentation issues now. I have deleted everything. So there is no problem. We will rewrite it. We will call them, not a big deal. So now let me run it and my database should be ready. It says process finished with exit of 0. So let's go back and refresh this. And my database is here. As you can see, it is an empty database at present. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be writing the rest of the code. So I wanted to keep it ready, but it looks like it's not going to happen. So I'm just going to have to rewrite the entire thing. Okay, so let us have a look at what else we can do. So now my database is ready. So since my database is ready, I don't need it anymore. Instead, I am going to have to connect to the database without using the MySQL. By specifying the database that I want to connect to. So I'm just going to comment this out and uncomment this, because this will create a connection to an existing database for me, as you very well know. So once the database is created, I want to be able to create a table inside it. So now, how do I create a table? What is it that I would need to write here? I would need to write a very simple query to create a table inside this. So let us write the create query. So I'm writing a create query here. Let's give it a name. What? Books. So what is the query that I would like to give here? The first one would be a book ID. This would be of type int and a primary key. Then second thing that I would like to give is the title of the book. Let's make it a varchar of, let us say 150. Let's make it a not null. Let's give it a price. Let us say double, not null. So now this is the entire query that I am going to be writing and running. Now I want to be able to execute this particular query. So let us execute this particular query. So for us to execute the query, we use the cursor again. So my cursor dot execute. So I need to specify what is the query that I want to execute. Now let us see if this particular query executes. As you know, my connectivity is already established. So I have connected to the database here, and I've created the cursor again. Now I'm going to be running a simple create query. Let's check to see if this create query works. And there you have it. Let us go and check to see if our create query works. My tables should have been created. So there you have a table which is at present empty. So usually what we do is we start by performing CRUD operations on this particular table. So I already have my table ready. Now we are going to write the remaining part of it. Now the thing here is simple. I already have the statements pre-written. So we are going to be working with getting the data into place. So I have an insert statement here. One second. Just minimize this. So if you look at it, I have a very specific set of functions already predefined. So one of them is to insert into the table. Then I have one for retrieving all the records, retrieving a single record, updating a single record, and deleting a single record. So these are the queries that I have rewritten. So we are going to start by trying to insert into the table. So this particular function, insert into table, it returns a value. So it basically returns a tuple. Now this tuple is what we are going to be sending into the insert statement. So let us start by writing the insert statement. Again, I'm commenting out these two lines. Already the table is created. I don't want to run it again. So let's start with writing an insert query. So you have insert into. Now I want to be able to send the data into this. So I'm going to write this in a slightly different manner. Usually when we are writing an insert query in SQL, the way we write it is insert into books. And then, we give the names of the columns that we are working with. So I want it to replace it. So now let us start by calling that particular insert statement. So whatever it is that is being returned, let me call the insert into table method that I have. This returns the tuple back. Now call the cursor and specify the query that you want it to work with and the tuple you want to use to replace the %s values that you have written into the query. So the %s values are basically what we call as placeholders. So they are going to be retaining the placement of the various contents for you when you write a simple insertion. So now let us see if it works. So it's asking for an ID. You can make it auto incrementable, but I am just writing it in either way. So you can get it to return a value. You can get it to, you can check to see if it returns a value. You can retrieve and find out whether there are a particular set of, whether something has been, whether the record has been inserted successfully into the database or not. You can cross check about all of that by just using a particular statement of your cursor. As I said, you can check to see if a particular record has been inserted by testing to see if the number of rows are actually updated or not. So you can try it and see. You can check to see if it works. Now, in this case, there is going to be a small issue. It may not have inserted it or committed the transaction. So I want to be able to commit the transaction. So I'm going to give my cursor dot. You have something called as, do I use my cursor or the connection? You give MySQL. This is the variable that we are using. Am I right? MySQL DB is the variable that we are using. So this is the dot commit is what you're going to give to make sure that that particular transaction is committed. So once it has been committed, we do have what is known as a row count. You can check to see if the row count has been actually handled or not. So my cursor dot, you have something called row count, give a comma and just say record inserted. So this ensures that you know whether a particular record has been inserted or not. In the previous case, I had not written a commit. I had just run the execute statement. Now we will rerun it, but this time with a commit. As I told you, anything that is being inserted is going to be inserted using a permanent insert by using commit. So now you get one record inserted and it did get inserted this time 100%. I'm using the same values that I used earlier for a very simple reason, because it was not inserted earlier. Primary key is not giving a problem when I'm inserting it now. So if I go and refresh it, I should be able to see the values in my database. So a simple insert statement can be run like this. Now, along with inserts, I do have other statements. So you have what is called as a get all records. And this retrieves all the records that are there within that particular table. So whether it is 1, whether it is 10, it will retrieve all the records from that particular table. Then at one for retrieving a single record, we will have a look at all of these. Now the first one, the one that I'm looking at now, is to be able to insert one more statement. So I'm going to be inserting one more record. So let us say 3. So it's inserted a second record. You can go back and recheck. Now I have 2 books. Now I want to be able to retrieve the content from the table. So we are going to be writing a simple read. So in the 4 operations that we usually work with, the CRUD operations, I finished with insert, which is your create. Second thing we're going to be having a look at is how to work with the select queries. You can use any of the select queries that you have with the where clause, the order by, or any of the other clauses that we have. You can use your select queries with all of them, not a problem. You just have to be able to write the query into your statement properly. That's all you require. Then you can fire it. So here I'm going to work with running the select query. So I already have the select query, which is a get all records. So I'm just going to call get all records. To this, I'm going to pass my cursor. And there you have, it has retrieved both the records for you. Similarly, you can retrieve a single record by passing the ID. Now that is also an easy one to work with. So I have a method that I've already written. Again, this is a method that requires me to send my cursor. So I'm sending the cursor in, and I am going to have to give a particular value, and it retrieves the content for you for that particular ID only. Simple statements that I have used here for working with the ID. Now here I am using only one table, but in a real-time environment, it's not that we use a single table. We can use multiple tables. We do work with multiple tables. And yes, you can write joins here. You can write subqueries, anything at all that you work with when you work with a regular RDBMS, the SQL queries that you write there, all of them are valid. They will work beautifully here as well. Coming to the update and the deletes, both of them will also do the same thing for you, where you are going to be working with a single update in this case. Supposing I want to be able to update multiple records, I just set the multi to true one. Second thing, there is an option available to you when you are executing it, a query through the cursor, called as multi. This allows you to update multiple records. You need to set it to true. That's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do is when you write your update query itself, make sure that the field that you are working with in the where clause, that field is a multi-valued field. That means it's a duplicate field. It allows for duplicates. It is not a field which is going to not allow for duplicates. You need to just keep these two statements in mind when you're working with an update statement. So let's write a simple update as well. So I want to be able to update the price. So I'm passing the cursor to this. Now let us run it. So the way I have written this methods here, or the functions here, is I am passing the cursor into the functions. When I pass the cursor into the functions, they are going to execute using the cursor that I have, obviously. So I'm using the cursor, I'm passing the cursor into my functions. So let's say 1, and I'm getting a record updated. If you have a look at the way the query is written, I am checking to see if row count is greater than 0. If it is not greater than 0, it will not print record updated. If not, it will print record updated. If you go back and rerun this particular statement, it should have run this. Now you can see for yourself, I got a record updated, but it hasn't updated it. Again, the reason for that is because my commit statement is off. So as I already told you, if you don't have a commit running for your updates, deletes and inserts, the transaction does not get written in permanently. Yes, the transaction fires, and yes, there is an update up there, but it is not a permanent update. So you want it to be permanent, written in permanently. Please make use of the commit statement without fail. Now it will reflect the change. So this is about the update. The delete is also in the same way. So to delete it here also, I have used a simple record. Everywhere I am passing a tuple. See, one of the things is that when you write an execute statement with the cursor, it takes the query that you want to fire, and the values that you want to replace. Now, the values that you want to replace have to either be a tuple or they have to be a list. So here I'm using a tuple everywhere. I'm not using a list. So the tuple or tuple, pronunciation Tuple, that I'm making use of is, I've just given it the name of val. But for the execute to run, it requires you to give a tuple when you have to replace values in your statements. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind when we work with this. So I'm just calling the delete statement. This is the last statement that I will be working with. Again, I have a commit. The commit is very important. So record with ID 3 has been deleted. Let's go and refresh. And yes, it has been deleted. So this is just a very simple demo of what you can do when you're working with database connectivity with Python. The statements that I've used are all very simple. But as I already told you, if you work with database connectivity, especially with RDBMS, any and every statement that you would run in the server, the MySQL server, or you're working with Oracle or Postgre or any other RDBMS, all the SQL statements you work there are very much valid. You can work with them here as well. So you can use multiple tables, you can have connectivity between tables, you can work with all of that here also. You can have foreign key and primary key combinations working through your Python itself. You can create those tables here, set up the relationships, do everything from Python itself. So this is about how database connectivity happens. One, there are a few things that we have to keep in mind. One of them being that we need to close the connection every time so that there is no leakage, there is no blocking or locking of the tables that we are using. So every time we fire a request, we finish the transaction, we close the connection, we reopen the connection for the next transaction. That is the norm. Second thing is, for every insert, update, and delete statement that you're working with, you have to have a commit. Otherwise, the transaction does not get written into the database permanently. It is going to be a temporary transaction, which is not going to reflect. That could cause, as you very well know, stale data. So you want the transaction to be written in. Make sure that you are going to write a commit every time. And yes, you can put all of this. It's required that you write everything into a try and an except and a finally block, so that you can handle any errors that could occur in case there is some issue with the database, or in case there is an issue with the connectivity. It is all preferable that you put it. I don't know, it was a working code. Suddenly I started getting issues with the try and the except. So that's the reason why I just removed the lot. It is not, it is recommended that when you're working with databases, when you're working with database connectivity, you use exception handlers or error handlers everywhere, so that you can make sure that there is seamless execution of your code that you are going to write. So that's it from my end. So over to my colleague for the rest of it. So Ria and Kaushik, over to you.
Thank you, Pallavi, for your invaluable insights on technology. I'm sure it was certainly a very good informative session for all of you. If you guys are interested in learning more about various database connectivity using Python, do check out our super discounted batches of virtual instructor LED trainings on our website springpeople.com. These VILT trainings are leveraged online from the comforts of your home and flexible as per your schedule and location. If you do not find any suitable batches, we'd be happy to discuss and schedule private batches for you. If you don't have time to join online, then do try out our affordable self-paced courses. For more information, do write to us at training@springpeople.com or call on our number displayed on the current slide.
Okay. So I hope that answers. And there are a couple of polls that are being enabled, so please answer them. Any other questions that you might have, please ask. The way it is connecting to NoSQL is a little different, as I already told you. So I will see if I can do something about that. So any other questions or doubts, please?
All right, due to time constraint, we are ending the current session. Rest of your questions will be answered offline. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. We shall be sending out the webinar recording to all your participants soon. I request you to kindly provide feedback before signing off, which will help us improve the quality of our future events. Thanks again for joining us today. Signing off on behalf of Team Spring People. Hope to see you again for our next expert webinar. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Pallavi.